then we'll review the 10 measures of the framework for design excellence before opening up the Common App and reviewing its inputs line by line. So in 10 measures, the framework for design excellence seeks to inform progress towards a zero carbon, inclusive, equitable, resilient, and healthy built environment. The framework serves as a vision for what the architectural profession strives to achieve, and the toolkit provides practical resources to help all architects achieve this vision. And just a note, this is not a checklist, but instead a guide to excellence in practice. And as you all likely know, so every year COTE presents the COTE Top 10 Awards, the industry's best known awards program at this point for sustainable design excellence. And the Common App, it really asks applicants to submit simple performance metrics, which aggregate to generate a spider graph. You can kind of see this spider graph here. And just as an example, this project, just its visuals is telling us that its focus was really on, optimal energy performance, designing for change, and we'll get into what that means through the framework a little bit later, and integration. So you can kind of see how they kind of pull out to these different measures. This single graphic can help provide a jury with a high-level view of the project's performance, and in turn allowing all projects to be eligible for a COTE award, doing away with a separate application for this award. And these questions, as we'll go through and as you'll see a little bit later, are mostly yes/no questions or in narrative form, and were designed to not add any additional time burden for submitting firms. So the Common App really is a tool to use towards aligning our values and how we select award-winning projects. The awards alignment program goals are threefold: to align our values with how awards are awarded, to simplify the process of multiple award submissions so that firms of all sizes and resources can fairly compete, and to collect, track, and make available to the membership consistent data of our work. The Common App is now administered at the national level, but we can have some state pride as some of our San Antonians, Corey Squire and Elena Zambrano, along with Ann Schaaf of Malin Architects in Seattle, were some of the early authors of the Common App. So since 2019, many chapters across the country have adopted the Common App as their application for award submissions. And last year, the Common App was adopted for the first time at the TXA level for our design award submissions. And the goal of the Common App is to encourage us all to wholly consider and track performance measures that align with the framework for design excellence. So this document, this Common App, should really be considered a living document, one that is continually updated and improved upon for redistribution each year after incorporating feedback from the previous year. So this update work is now done at the COTE national level. So I'm going to hand it over to Brady to take us through the first measures of the framework for design excellence.
All right. The framework for design excellence, as Sam gave us a good update, was adopted in 2019, right, by the AIA. And so it's 10 measures, and these guide architects, and the American Institute of Architects agrees that these define our values as architects. And so the measures are design for integration, design for community, design for ecology, design for water, design for economy, design for energy, design for wellness, design for resources, design for change, and design for discovery. And I'll go through the first 5 of these, and then Sam will run through the second half of it. So design for integration, the first one, I think, is something that all architects learn when they go to architecture school and they work under a very good architect who teaches them that you need to take all the aspects of the program and the client's needs and the community's needs, and integrate them into something that's beautiful, a central concept. And a lot of times this is what draws people in design awards, is going to be the beauty of the project and how well integrated the concepts are into the built project. So this is fundamental to sort of any generation of architecture, I think. And it's sort of, I think, what we all aspire to is that higher levels of integration to make a beautiful building. Design for equitable communities, I believe, is being discussed more in recent years, although has been a concern for a long time. This seeks creative strategies to promote alternative transportation, identify your community, and work with them to define shared goals. A lot of projects are doing community outreach to gather information from neighborhoods before they go in and build a project, to make sure that the project is getting community engagement. So design solutions affect more than the client and current occupants. Good design positively impacts future occupants and the larger community. Design for ecosystems. This one is about the natural environment. Good design mutually benefits humans and non-human inhabitants. If you can only do a couple of things, develop an indexing framework that assesses attributes of the surrounding pre-development. Design a landscape composed of 100% native plants, avoid decorative turf grass, create natural nighttime habitat conditions by eliminating unnecessary artificial light and sound while no humans are present. That's related to dark skies. This relates to, obviously, nature, wildlife, and all aspects of the natural world. Measure 4, design for water. We have more and more people moving to Texas, obviously, and Texas has been concerned about their freshwater reserves for a long time. So this is continuing to be a concern, and good design conserves and improves the quality of water as a precious resource. If you can only do a couple of things, benchmark indoor water use and compare this number to anticipated use. A lot of projects say that we've used these fixtures and we're using 20% less water. This benchmark is saying that, measure that, and that's actually going to be in a later, in the discovery phase of going back and doing a post-occupancy evaluation. Reduce or eliminate outdoor water use. That goes back to the previous one about using native plants that don't require more water than we receive in an annual basis. Manage stormwater runoff with goals of increasing on-site infiltration and improving water quality downstream. Now commonly that's legislated with detention and retention ponds on the site and those things. And there's always more creative ways to pursue how to improve the quality of the water coming off our sites. Design for economy. I believe this is a very fundamental architect's role as well. Good design adds value for owners, occupants, community, and planet, regardless of project size and budget. If you can only do a couple of things, reuse an existing building if possible, right size the program early and keep the square footage as efficient as possible while managing design for change. Edit your palette, keep the total number of materials to a minimum. So design economically. And I believe Sam will run through these next 5.
Yeah, thanks, Brady. I'll run through the next 5 measures here. And you just kind of heard Brady's, some of these measures that'll, they'll say, if you could only do a couple things, if you could only do one thing. And then there are a number of leading questions as well. So if you're familiar or not familiar with the website, the Framework for Design Excellence, again, we'll put that link in the chat here so that you can peruse those measures at your leisure as well. So design for energy. So self-explanatory, but we are moving towards a all electric, kind of eliminating dependence on fossil fuel sources for our energy for projects if you're able to. So utilizing efficient systems, possible off-grid net zero or net zero ready, solar ready strategies for projects, just so that they're also ready for change, which is another design for change measure that we'll talk about a little bit later. Some possibilities with solar thermal systems or hydronic gradient heating or cooling systems that are a lower draw for energy, and then taking advantage of our orientation, climate, and passive strategies. The next measure is design for well-being. So the idea that good design supports health and well-being for all people, and being considerate of physical, mental, and emotional effects on building occupants due to their surrounding building and extending to the surrounding community. So, one of those things that we could do is give a little bit more control to our occupants over their immediate environments, allow occupants to experience biophilic effects or natural elements through the building's connection to its surroundings, or develop acoustic goals and a plan for achieving them so that there is kind of a calm and well-being in that building. The next measure, it's design for resources. Just promoting that good design depends on informed material selection, balancing priorities to achieve durable, safe, and healthy projects with an equitable, sustainable supply chain to minimize possible negative impacts on the planet. So a lot of these they're kind of feedback loops to each other, but just a couple of things if you're able. Identify a few chemicals. We are all familiar, I think, at this point with the red list, which is a really hard thing to achieve, a red list free project, just given the nature of our products at the moment. But you could identify a couple of those chemicals to eliminate from the project. That's one thing that you can do. And then also just selecting materials that are low carbon, known to be low carbon, and move on to the next measure, design for change. So we all are very familiar, I think, at this point as well with resilience, resilient, really wanting to talk about adaptability, resilience, and reuse as essential to good design. Seeking to enhance usability, functionality, and value over time, over the life cycle of that building. And we'll get into kind of that life cycle, lifetime of the building when we get into the Common App in that spreadsheet. So flexibility and future adaptability of a space, if possible, risk assessment, resilience in terms of materials and actually the design, potentially of a foundation system or in a particular place, and with that particular place's specific climate issues. And then passive survivability, thinking about the ability of a building to operate in terms of energy storage or a robust envelope when it potentially does not have a hookup to utility. And then the last measure, design for discovery. I think we all know every project just really presents kind of specific and unique opportunities to apply lessons learned from previous projects, and also to gather information to refine the design process for later projects. So some of those focus topics would be post-occupancy evaluations, engagement surveys, knowledge sharing and lessons learned, whether that's after the building is built, having kind of a summary wrap up with your firm or the public, and then discovery that influences behavior. So how did the design perform, and those can be discovered through engagement surveys with building users, building occupants, the people who are living and using that building every day. So we're gonna just another all of the 10 measures summarized here. There are a number of resources. The AIA Framework for Design Excellence website, Code Top 10 Awards, Common App and Super Spreadsheet, just a toolkit for the Common App, AIA Materials Pledge, the 2030 commitment, and then ILFI's resources, Just Label, and Red List. So I think now we're really just gonna jump into the Common App and kind of do the work with you. So hopefully you'll have some questions and we can answer them just in anticipation of your submittal for the Design Awards application. I'm going to hand it over to Brady here to open up the Common App.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Yep, you can see it.
Great. Okay, we're just going to run through this somewhat informally, and feel free to put some questions in the chat, or feel free to speak up and ask a question as well. It's kind of a small group we have on the call, so we can chat. So as Sam mentioned, this is sort of a living document. Each year, it's going to be a little bit new and improved. It's gone from a very basic spreadsheet to a pretty cool looking spreadsheet, which makes it nicer. And of course, we have our fun spider graph here at the top, which I think most AIA Design Awards are sort of using that as a graphic to go along with the Design Awards. And of course, the State Awards will use this spreadsheet. The information at the beginning is just project information. So, for example, the project name and the client and the address and those sorts of things. Now, in the location, it does have climate zone, and the climate zone is very easy to look up. But some of these cells, in this cell, you could just type some things. But some of the cells, you click on them, and a little arrow pops up here on the right, and you can drop that down, and it gives you options. And you can pick the climate zone. And if you don't know your climate zone, you can click this link. There's a lot of helpful links over here on this side. So you can click that link, and it'll take you, and you can look up the climate zone. And this one is only for California. So they added that one last year because California started to use our spreadsheet now. So it's becoming a more national spreadsheet. And then, so this is about the building use occupancy type. And so this is a mixed use building. It's got 50% multifamily, it's got 10% restaurant and general retail. This is a drop-down box, and you can choose of many, many options here. And we've added options because every year someone's going to be filling this out, and every projects are as different as people are different. You're going to run into a project. You might say, hey, can we add some specific use there? We're getting close to having all of them, I believe. Project scope. New construction, this is a drop down. Renovation, construction, interiors, so new construction, number of stories, That can be whatever your project, you just type that in. Floor area, you type that in, and site area in square feet. And then it provides the FAR, floor area ratio there. Cost data. Of course, this year we're all learning how much more expensive a building is today than it was in 2018. So this is useful data for, we're working on ways to collect this data and sort of keep more historic data on award-winning projects and sort of their cost per square foot and those sorts of things. And then hours of operation, it's got the little equation here. You just have to calculate the hours of operation of the project. Typical occupancy, of course, if it's a residential or commercial project, those are going to be much different, but your project will have its own hours of operation.
Yeah, and I think Brady, just, for that one, that might be one of the first that, maybe the second that fills itself in. So you'll see that all the gray, I think you were just mentioning the gray boxes are either drop down boxes or fill in the blank. And then all the white boxes are going to be kind of calculated for you based on the gray box inputs.
Okay, so in this gray box, if I type in 40 and hit it, then this white box here calculates itself, the total hours. So that's how that works there. 2013 challenge, the 2013 commit, 2030, excuse me. 2030 commitment, 70% energy reduction. You can enter some information there if you're reporting that.
Yeah, and that's really, that's going to be filled in already because of, we're in 2020, we're kind of between 2020 and 2025, which are kind of benchmarks that are drilling down our overall energy use, and all of those percentages above baseline or reduced from energy baseline are coming from that. You can kind of see to the right there that CBEX, actually a 2003 survey of buildings. So all of that 2030 data is based on that baseline study.
And I've been demonstrating here, these are just yes, no boxes. This spreadsheet actually has a lot of just yes, no boxes, which make it very easy to fill out. Design for integration. I believe most architects like to describe their efforts in words. And so this is an opportunity to provide more description to the jurors. These are all things that you type in, 200-word max. But a project summary statement, client impact statement, statement of design excellence. So this is describe your project, emphasize design achievements, including design intent, program requirements, describe specific ways in which you achieved and integrated these goals and requirements, and any distinguishing aspects of your project. Relate how the project came in to be including the client's goals, what impact the finished project has made on the client, users, and others in the community, and then describe the project's approach to sustainability through design. How does the project use architectural design to benefit the occupants of the community and the planet, and so forth. So you get to express yourself there a little bit in words, and then when we look at this, I'm thinking that you get kind of like a 10-point value here for integration without anything in. And maybe that's because you're an architect and you've designed a building that's up for an award. And so you get 1 point right off the bat. Design for equitable communities. This is more or less applicable to different projects. If you're doing a library, this is probably extremely important. and you'll have a lot of information to share here. If you're doing a private residence in a rural community, you will have maybe engaged with a homeowners association, or you may engage with the client, but you might not have a whole lot of things in this category. So every project's going to be a little different. However, owners, the community engagement level, if you click here, you could say, owners only were engaged, or you can go to broad community engagement, community stakeholder narrative. Were notable community engagement efforts part of this process? You could describe that. Justice and equity. Does the project benefit people who are not directly associated with the project? This is a drop-down box, yes or no. Yes, if so, provide an example. And here you can just type in your example. Transportation choice. This has a link to a walk score. It's pretty easy. You click on that and then you type in the address, and I was going to kind of go through this. If we want to go back and like try all these links, we can. We've done that in years past. I think everybody's becoming more familiar with this, so I wasn't going to like do all of those things.
Yeah. Hey Brady, Ron has a question, general question. So how chapters responded to small firms that feel they don't have resources to adequately complete these forms? So it's a great question. And the way that the Common App has been rolled out in different chapters, now at the state level, in San Antonio, we didn't require any of this to be submitted. So this was a supplemental application. And because most of it is yes, no, or narrative form, there are some metrics that we're asking for, but if you don't have those metrics, that's okay too. So we've just been demonstrating that it takes about an hour to go through and fill in. And so in that way, feel like it's fairly straightforward. And again, if you don't have the information for your project, that's okay too.
Yeah, I think I've heard it's more the data collection rather than just the actual input of the data. There's just times when smaller practices just aren't tracking the information the same way some of the larger practices might be doing it. Not saying that's right or wrong. I'm not making a qualitative assessment, but we hear that a lot, and they get the sense that if we're submitting for a design award, everyone's asking to complete the Common App. We don't have that. We haven't filled in all the information. Does that sort of hinder our ability to win the award? I think that's their concern that we've heard.
Yeah, and I think we have been looking at it as a supplemental. So if, let's say, a jury is looking at between a couple projects, I'm not, from our experience, this isn't the initial deciding factor. It might come down to, we'll then dive into the Common App a little bit deeper, but it's not the initial decision maker.
Right. I agree. And maybe in our awards application, we have to be clear on that, or maybe somehow reinforce without trying to compromise it, to ensure everyone that this is supplemental. Because again, I understand and I agree, most jurors are going to look at this, and most of the jury members that we invite are sophisticated enough to where a good project is more than just how it looks. But they might not speak explicitly to the Common App results. But if some of these smaller firms are submitting, they get the sense that, it's still on the list. So therefore, yes, it might be supplemental, but does that still? Anyway, I think we have to just clarify that to the smaller firms. And as we know, there's a predominance of small firms who submit for awards programs.
think I like to look at it as if you were in the grocery store and you were choosing between two bags of chips. They both look like good chips. You might turn it around and look at the nutrition facts on the back, and you say, well, I mean, these chips have a lot of salt in them, and these chips have less salt in them. I think I'm going to buy the one.
If I know the
with less
salty
salt.
ones taste better, I might still want that salty bag. So I'm just saying,
Yeah, and
I
a
mean,
lot of
yeah, right. No, I mean, I think we all understand there's a lot of different ways to interpret. And I think we all, again, I just want to make sure that we somehow can appease everyone. That's all I'm asking for is that I'm listening closely to understand how we can ensure that no one feels like they are outside the bounds of being included for consideration if they haven't fully completed this. Because I agree, it's supplemental. I mean, we know there's a lot of information here that maybe is not vetted by a third party, so you're kind of putting in your best case numbers or some of the aspirations, and it's a little difficult to be fully convicted on some of the data. But I think it's just a good conversation. But I'm glad to hear. I just wanted to hear what everyone's thoughts were. But I think supplemental is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and I do think, getting these measures also, or, just these metrics in front of more people for
Yeah.
the submission process, maybe not this year, but maybe
Right.
the next year, in the next year, this will be something that will be more top of mind.
Yeah, they'll put it into their process a bit more.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I think also a lot of architects are achievement-oriented people who feel like they want to get 100 on a test. This is not a test, and you're not graded on it. So, like, for example, 2030 commitment. A few large firms are reporting to the 2030 challenge. Probably, I mean, in Texas, probably no small firms are reporting to the 2030 challenge. I don't know. There may be one or two. I don't know. But it's so easy to just put no on this, no.
Right.
And you don't get a bad grade or anything. You just move on. It's just data to see how many people are contributing. And so, yeah, just kind of look at it. This is just data. And if your project is beautiful, people are going to see that your project is beautiful. And so we try to, each time we do this, we try to kind of say that in a different way, but we want to emphasize it that we're all kind of learning how to think about data more with design. And it's sort of our evolution as we're sort of an in-between generation of becoming more analytical humans. And this is an in-between of getting us there.
Good, thanks.
Design for ecosystems. This has a lot of drop-down boxes, so it's very easy. Where's your project located? Site environment. It's a suburban site. Was it previously developed? This one wasn't, maybe. It's a fictional project here. Does your landscape design consist of only native plants? You can say no to that if you want to. Does the site align with dark sky standards? Yes, you should always do that. I don't care who you are, even if you're a small firm. No, it's your choice and your client's choice, but we do encourage responsible design. Does your project utilize bird-friendly design strategies? Maybe it doesn't. Does the landscape? So anyway, those are drop-down boxes. We don't need to get into that too much. Design for ecosystem narrative. Here you can type. Maybe you said no on all of these things, but there's still something that you did for the ecosystem that you want to just describe in words, and you can type that in there. Design for water. This is a lot of drop-down boxes as well. Is stormwater managed on the site? Is potable water used for irrigation? So most of these are just yes, no. All
Maybe
these are.
Brady, could you fill those in? We can kind of see the spider graph changing as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So if you say yes to most of these, then you're going to get rain.
So stormwater managed on site, potable water used for irrigation.
So the water starts to come up higher on that to say that that was a priority of the site. Let me, stormwater managed on site, potable. Oh, probably if I say no to this, it'll be better. No. Potable water used for cooling. No. Black water reused on site, yes. Now we can go back and look at it again. And now we did better. That's how the graph works. And then you could type a little bit of exclamation about how you approach water there. So most of these are, I mean, so far we haven't gotten into anything where you're doing any kind of calculation. Except for maybe in the project, just the project cost and square footage and stuff like that. But I think everybody's going to know that, or at least be able to calculate it pretty easily. Building efficiency. This is designed for economy. Square foot per occupant. Describe strategies taken to right size the building. Does the project address issues of affordability? Does the project reduce built area? Issues of affordability. Not this, well, this is a multi-family project, so yes, it does. Does the project reduce built area by designing spaces for multiple purposes? These are just yes or no questions. And then the cost per square foot. Oh, kind of bump me around there. A cost per square foot. I don't think anybody's getting $200 a square foot these days. Oh, maybe a multifamily project. I'll just leave it alone.
Yeah, so that one should be up. So that one's calculated for you.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
So
Sam.
it would be up. If you want to just scroll up and show where that is.
That one populates for you based on the floor area and the square footage and the cost. The cost and the square footage, and then it just populates there. So then if you double click in it like I was doing, then it kind of glitches around a little bit because it's just populating itself. Design for economy narrative. You can describe like maybe you designed so that you didn't have to cut a piece of gyp. It was all on a 4-foot module or something like that. There's a lot of different things that you might try to do. Yeah, all right. And Sam, I think this is where you take over.
Yeah, maybe I'll instead of directing you, maybe I'll just share my screen.
Oh yeah, that's probably better.
Probably a little easier. Okay, so we're gonna pick up with measure 6. So design for energy here. What, it's going to ask you your energy code that the project was built to. So you have a number of options. I think we've gotten all of our possible options in here. There's, Seattle, California, Washington, some places that have their own codes. So we're just gonna go with ICC 2018. So that's going to tell the spreadsheet it's linked a certain standard. So we have estimated this EUI, which is kilobtts per square foot per year for the project. It'll change depending on that code. So we're going to go with 2018, and then you'll see that benchmark EUI again. That's based on this CBEX building survey from 2003, and that baseline also comes from your percentage of building type that you enter up here. So all of that is automated for you and it gives you your average or your aggregated EUI for that for your project, and then that estimated EUI based on the code. So if you're building, so essentially if you're building to code, to the code that you submitted, so that 2018 code, then you're going to be a certain percentage above that baseline here. So we'll look at that down at this next energy performance section. So, so how are you reporting energy performance for this award submission? So we're going to just say none for this project, and we're going to say we're just, we're building to code, and that's how we're doing prescriptive to IECC 2018. And so then what is our gross EUI? And we're going to say that it's 55 because that's what our estimated built to code building is. And then the next line here is just, do we have any on-site renewables? So are we, let's just say we're going to do solar on this project. And we know that we can offset a certain percentage of that overall EUI for this project. We're going to say, yep, we're going to offset more than half of that energy use for this project. And let's run through the next couple cells, and then I'll go back and kind of change this so we can all see what that does. So EUI, the net EUI, so this is considering the produced energy on site. So that's kind of taking away what from that consumed energy for the EUI here, the kilobt's per square foot per year. And that's calculated based on what our input is here. So if we're going to say 0, then that just means that our net, essentially our net EUI is the same as our consumed gross EUI here, because we don't have any renewables. And let's just go for that scenario right now. And what that means is that predicted reduction from the benchmark is here, which is calculated from our certain, building type percentages that we inputted kind of in that first section. And so we are 45, we're reducing our overall energy, our overall consumption from that baseline, just based on, building to code by 45%. And that's great. We're doing that. But the next question is, does the project meet the 2030 challenge? And that's going to say no, because at this point, the 2030 challenge is asking for a 70% reduction from baseline. And just wanted to note that it's a tough goal. So that's okay. Not all projects are going to meet the 2030 challenge, and this project doesn't either. But that's okay. So that's just the snapshot of our project here. And then the percentage of projects total energy use met by renewables, we're going to say 0 because we didn't have solar on this project, or we didn't have any on-site generation, and that's the way that this particular project was built out. And so that's the snapshot of our energy performance for this project. So we can now go up and kind of see how that affected our spider graph. So energy here, and Brady filled those in for the water, but I switched over a spreadsheet, sorry. So I didn't have those on there. So anyway, the energy, the water hasn't been filled out for my spreadsheet, but energy is now kind of average, and that's built to code here. So we have the next set of cells, which are energy conservation process and strategies. So this is a drop-down menu. The project was modeled, what type of energy model was performed. So a code or lead compliance model, a design energy model, which could be a number of things, Insight or Sapphira, or a number of energy or design energy models that either you or your consultant team does. And for this one, we're just going to say none. And then, was the energy model used to inform decisions during design? And because this one didn't have one, we'll say no. Did the project follow prescriptive performance to meet energy code? And we're going to say yes to that, because we were using a prescriptive performance approach. And then if there's anything else here, if there were glazing strategies or shading that was implemented on certain sides of the building, south shading or brise approaches, or is there an energy monitoring or a dashboard for this project if it's a larger project? And you could talk about that here for this narrative. And then, were there any equipment strategies? So were you using a efficient HVAC system, any ERVs or dedicated dehumidification, anything that might be just thinking about energy, certainly, but then again, kind of all these things kind of dovetail into each other. So that would also be great indoor air quality or well-being for the interior of the building. So you have just the opportunity to talk a little bit more about approaches to the project here. And then let's jump down to measure 7, so design for well-being. And we talked about this a little bit just with the overview of the design excellence or framework for design excellence. That so, do regularly occupied spaces have operable windows? We're going to say yes, and that's kind of giving some control over to the users in their immediate space to make themselves more comfortable. Were glazing strategies studied to optimize daylight against excess heat gain? We'll say yes for this one. So we did do a daylight model. Maybe that identified some hot spots or some areas that we really did need exterior shading on that building. And so that helped to inform our design. Indoor filtration. So is our air filtered with MERV 13 filter or better? We'll say yeah, because that was part of the code that we had to do. And so that's just giving a little bit better indoor air quality for our people in our building. Was ventilation either natural or mechanical optimized for occupant health? And if we're going to say, this is talking about maximizing parts per million of CO2. Maybe we didn't do that, but we were looking at operable windows, and we made our building fairly narrow so that we could get a good cross breeze. And that's something we can kind of come down here and talk about a little bit more. But I'm going to say yes for that, because we have operable windows and we're thinking about a cross ventilation strategy for this building. Is potable water treated or filtered prior to human consumption? So this is talking about intentional design strategies to prevent runoff into municipal sewers or natural waterways. We actually didn't do that, so we're just going to say no. And then, was a chemicals of concern list used to inform material selection? And again, that's that red list chemicals of concern from the ILFI. And we're going to say, we actually really did want to not use PVC pipes, let's say, in this this project. So we're just going to say, you know, yes. And then again, we can kind of talk about any of those strategies up here in more detail in this narrative box here. So a couple other just things to think about, you know, human health toxicity, chemicals of concern, daylight autonomy, and that really, you know, daylight autonomy is really going to depend on your building type. So, you know, is it a school? Maybe really important part of the project? Is it a residence? Maybe an important part of the project, but not as important as some other building types. And then again, daylighting analysis. Was that something that you did? Natural ventilation or outdoor air strategies, maybe filtration, again, with better filters for your HVAC system. Okay, so let's look back and look at the design for well-being. So well-being, we did a lot of, had some focus on that for this project. So we're gonna, our spider graph's gonna change a bit. So again, Brady mentioned this was kind of already built in, this integration. We're gonna have to look at that a little bit, but so this project now is kind of looking like these couple strategies are kind of taking focus. Okay, so measure 8. This is all about resources and designing for resources. And so what is your primary structural system? We're really interested in looking at, let's say, a mass timber, heavy timber frame. So we're going to note that on this drop-down menu. Was a whole building environmental life cycle analysis and LCA conducted? We're going to, we know that this was a lower carbon option, but we actually didn't do an LCA for this project, let's say. We're going to say no. Provide embodied carbon results in units. So this is typically in kilograms of CO2 per meter squared, but we don't have that information. So we're going to leave that blank here. Was local and or recycled content a major criteria for material selection? And could be, but for this project, we're just going to say no. We weren't sourcing specifically local materials. Maybe, we're in, we'll say we're in Central Texas and we're looking at that cool Southern yellow pine, CLT factory in Alabama, but it's a little far away. So we're just going to say no. And that was a big part of our project here. So was wood used on this project FSC certified? We're going to say yes. And we did try to meet this higher percentage of FSC certified wood. Were there deliberate steps taken to substantially reduce material or embodied carbon in the structural design? I think the deliberate steps for the embodied carbon, we were using that timber frame versus a concrete or steel. So we're going to say yes to that because of that choice for this primary structural system. And then were the concrete mixtures optimized for embodied carbon reduction? We're going to say yes to that as well because we added some Portland cement, or sorry, some fly ash instead of Portland cement. So maybe that was a 40% fly ash mix, 30% fly ash mix that reduced that Portland cement percentage here for foundations. And then did the project incorporate existing structure or infrastructure? We're going to say no because this was a new construction project. So we didn't do any adaptive reuse or find a building that we could build out. So no. And then again, any other more lyrical, poetic writing about some of the strategies that were maybe not captured up in these drop down and fill in the blank cells here could go here. Was there anything else about promoting zero waste, maybe even on the construction site? And again, this isn't a checklist likely, but some of those strategies could translate, and you can talk about that here. And then efficient use of materials, low carbon concrete we talked about, how long the project will last. That actually is a little bit further down here, so we'll kind of talk about that in this next measure. And then any innovative sourcing of materials. So, was there any waste stream products or post maybe pre-consumer products that were used here, but maybe industrial recycling is possible in this narrative here. So move right along. I'm gonna just check if there are any questions here. Let's see. Oh, Catherine just made a comment, so I think you can all, I'll read that in the chat there. All right, we'll move on to design for change. And this is talking about the design to lifespan of the building. So, we're talking about a heavy timber building. These are giving some suggestions. If there's something that's more applicable, this is just, again, a suggestion for 30 years for stick frame, 100 years for concrete, steel, or heavy timber structures, and then a very long time for solid masonry buildings. We're going to say this is a 100-year building. And again, just a suggestion. So if you have a more specific design criteria, I enter that in here. Was the building designed for disassembly? Really cool concept, but we didn't do that. We did use some neat, maybe heavy timber connectors and things, but not fully disassemblable. Was future flexibility designed into the program? So, after a certain amount of time, maybe that this building could be adapted into something else. Maybe the bays were set up, 30-foot bays or 40-foot bays or 20-foot bays. And there's just really an interior fit out that can happen. We're going to say no to that because we'll say it's a very specific use for this Center for Design Excellence. So we wanted it to be this particular use into perpetuity. So we'll say no. So can the building remain useful for the short term without power? So this is talking about investment in the envelope, so fenestration, insulation, and we're going to say yes because we built a code, but we have exterior insulation and a fairly robust envelope with that's well sealed. So we're getting a good. We can hold that volume of air for a while with good, fresh air ventilation. So we'll say yes to this. So that's what this is really getting at is how good is your envelope in terms of air sealing and robustness of insulation. And then how about, can the building remain useful for the short term without utility power? And though we're all electric, we don't have a solar array. So we're going to say no, we're not producing power on site, or we don't have storage capacity on site, but something to think about as well. And then the next one is a little bit related to that, is the building design to accept future clean grid power. So backup power generation and storage, we actually don't have that in our building, but that's okay, we're just going to say no. And then has the design made accommodations for projected climatic change over the building's lifespan? So we invested, let's say, in some in our envelope for this building. So we used, let's say, rock wool insulation and things that were, were going to last for a long time, could get wet. The maintenance cycle is lessened with the selections that we made for our assembly. So that also means that, if we have a shift in temperature or some extreme weather, we're feeling that it's we're in a pretty good spot for our building to be able to adapt. So we'll say yes to that. And then identify a local risk that the project has been designed to mitigate. And so we're going to say extreme temperatures because of that good envelope that we have. And then we can add more nuance again to that, those design decisions here. Talk about the robust envelope and air sealing and how it can adapt to extreme temperatures, maybe these spikes in the summer here in Texas. And if there are any other strategies for future change or adaptation, or resilient strategies in terms of material use, that would be something that would go here. Talking about passive survivability, which were those measures that could the building be useful for the short term without power or without the feed from the utility company. We're gonna move right along here. And we're down to the last measure, so measure 10, design for discovery. And this is really, what did you learn? What that kind of fed into this project, or what could you learn from this project after it's built? So what was there a post-occupancy evaluation conducted on this project? And we actually didn't build that into the budget. So maybe on our next project, but we didn't do it on this one. But we're really interested in occupant satisfaction after the building was built. So we did plan to do an occupant satisfaction survey, and so we're going to say yes to that. And then were improvements made during occupancy based on findings? So really, did we take any of that information from that occupant satisfaction survey, and did we change anything? So let's say, we did do the occupant survey, and we said we found out that some people are a lot colder than they should be, and some people are a lot warmer than they should be, and maybe we go back and do a duct balance test or a duct balancing in the building to kind of mitigate some of those complaints. So we'll say, yep, we went back and maybe the set temperatures were a little bit adjusted, or some duct sealing happened that didn't happen during startup for that system. And so then in design for discovery narrative, do you have any other lessons learned, or were there any other measures that were set up between you, the designer, and the building operator, or the people using the building? Was there a building manual that was given over to the building operator? Are there any, check-ins like a year later with that operations manager? You can talk about that here. And then were there any other, design strategies that were implemented to kind of give the occupants just a little bit more kind of delight in occupying that building? You could talk about that here as well. Are there any outdoor spaces for kiddos to run around, or contemplation garden, or anything that could be an amenity for the building occupants? We can talk about here as well. So I'm seeing that we don't have any other questions. If you do, please, we have a couple of minutes here, so 19 minutes or so. Please do ask us. We're happy to help. I'm not sure if anyone's kind of working on their application yet, but we will be doing that second session that Catherine mentioned in April. So yeah, if there is anything else, we'd love to chat with you.
Hi, this is Ron. This is a slightly higher altitude question, but we know AIA National has COAT awards separate from design awards. How does that, is there any talk about that being reconciled or combined? Or, I mean, it's going to always allow for, okay, here's the COAT and here's the sort of COAT or design awards. It always creates a little bit of it's too much of a split or bifurcation for me. But what, is there any talk going on at the national level about this that we're aware of?
There is. So, as this has been rolled out over the last 3 years, Brady, right? Certain chapters have made that alignment, but at the national level, there has been talk about that as well, to make it, a single application for, so that everyone who submits an application would be also submitting for a COAT award.
And don't get me wrong, I like the COAT award just because I can go to that resource and know that those are going to drill down deeper, and it's a different resource. I mean, but you can't have it both ways, and I'm just trying to. I like them both, but I also recognize that they're sort of merging in these kinds of steps we're taking. But that's more of a comment, I guess, than a question.
Yeah, Ron, I'll say it hasn't happened yet, so but
Yeah.
there's talk, I guess.
Yep.
Talk about that and how to lift that. Yeah. What the time frame is.
Just a nuance in that is, like in San Antonio, there's not 2 applications, but
Right. Yeah.
usually the jurors do select one project as the COAT winner. It's just an exemplary project of sustainability. But all the projects submit kind of the common app and all that. So I think it allows, it allows people to explore these things more, and also not as many applications, which is great.
Right. Yep. Good point. And what is the thought about the data that's not necessarily verified? I mean, there's a lot of data that goes in that helps to kind of boost the spider web. I mean, clearly that's a more of an ethical question, but sometimes you don't have the data and you might err on the side of higher scores than lower. I mean, how does that kind of approached beyond just you put in what you know? I guess that's all you can do.
At the national level, there's a technical review committee, and they just look for big picture. Is anything really, noticeably inaccurate, wrong? I mean, there's no way this could be true kind of stuff. And then otherwise, there's some things with, I mean, I think EUI is really the only thing in this whole document that is very, very technical. And sometimes you might have a MEP engineer on board, and they can give you the projected EUI, or then you can use Revit Insight, which is a plugin into Insight. There's other there's other design analysis tools. But even then, is the software is only as accurate as the types of walls that you made in Revit and how much information was in those and the roof. And, so there's some, as long as the number is not completely unrealistic, it's probably not going to get picked up. But locally in San Antonio and at the state level, there's not a specific technical review committee reviewing those numbers. But like you said, it's sort of an ethical question. A lot of these, and I'm friends with Corey, who basically created the spreadsheet. And he was like, if you're filling this thing out and you're like, what is all this garbage I'm having to answer? And you're like, I don't care about dark skies. Why do I have to yes or no? No, I don't care about dark skies. And but if you're really that antagonistic towards it, just like reading the question is going to create like an argument in your mind. And you're going to go on and be like, well, I guess they'd be so proud of me if I try to reduce my dark skies. And, the next project you do, you might do that just because you're an antagonistic person who's trying to win an award. But just being exposed to these questions and kind of looking at them, it's like, not everybody deserves an award, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to just look at like, hey, this is what we think good design is. This is a criteria, like we'd love for you to participate in trying to make better design. But then on another realistic note is every project can't do every single thing and clients don't have endless budgets. And so just earnestly fill it out. Maybe you did some good, exemplary stuff. And in some categories, maybe it wasn't. And it's not going to be the end all on the design awards.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Brady. Not all projects can do everything. And I hope we showed that just kind of going through this one and just saying, this is a perfectly acceptable way to fill out the EUI design for energy, cells. So this is like a prescriptive, project. It's it's the 2018 or 2015 code. And as you can see, it's already, based on the metrics that the AII 2030 commitment uses. Our codes are always going to be better than the baseline here. So even the 2006 code is going to be 10% better than that baseline. So just keep that in mind. I know this can kind of, if you're not, UI is not your thing, it's not the language that you speak, that's okay. We hopefully have built in a little bit of automation here for you. So just kind of looking at this, you're always going to just be a little bit better in code. This might not feel so good. Nope, you didn't meet the 2030 challenge. But again, this is a pretty aspirational thing right now. And to do this, even with the best, let's say, the IECC code that a lot of people have already adopted, you need additional on-site energy production. So anyway, this is just, it's perfectly acceptable. You're 45% better than that baseline, and that's okay. Maybe you're doing these really great things in well-being and for equitable communities, and that's where the strength of the project is going to kind of shine through.
2030 is only 8 years away. Can you believe that? We're going to evolve. We're going to evolve rapidly between now and then.
Yeah, and that is, a little bit of the urgency, I think, of the Common App, but it's also, I think we're all trying to do better, and hopefully, having some of this language, seeing the language, reading the language, hearing the language, is all gonna be absorbed for all of us. So.
Well, we have a quiet crowd here. Not too many questions, but that's probably a good thing. If everybody understands it, that's the best we could expect.
Yeah. Well, I guess if there are no more questions, again, we'll have a session on, sorry, Becky, is it the 4th? Did we decide?
Yes, that's correct. On the 4th, we'll have follow-up session, and then we'll also be posting a recording from today's presentation to the website so people can refer to it as a resource while they're working on their submissions.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you guys
Jason,
very much.
Yeah, Jason, we just saw your comment. The form makes sense. Just need to track down info. So yeah, no problem. Please reach out if you have questions.
Yep. Great. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks all.
Bye.